stream, start record. Twitch has been a real POS for me lately.
Okay.
So that's not actually a thing you need to know, but on my other screen I am watching on Twitch because there usually ends up being a delay. And I was running into this problem where I would... Oh, I mean, you saw this with JR. Right? You watched JR's
Yeah.
recording?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
watched the JR stream.
So, like, how it cut out
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
it should have? Yeah, so I'm still struggling with that. But
Mm.
now I'm finding that if I just watch on the other screen...
Do you want
I
me to
can catch
record
it.
my audio on my end so you have it one way or the other, or are you not going to be able to do anything with just my audio?
No. I mean, I'll be fine on that, but thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also running a recording through OBS.
Cool.
Anyway, we're live. Who are you?
All right. Hi, I am Jeff Stormer. I am a podcaster, game designer, and the unofficial LARP designer of the Olive Garden restaurant. I am also, this is the first stream where I'm claiming it. I am also claiming the spot as the internet's foremost distributor of jokes about the Great Clown Pagliacci. That's my new claim to fame. I'm taking that.
All right, fair. When did that come to be the case?
Couple weeks. I mean, honestly, it's been slowly building for the last several years as
Fair.
I've just realized that my true passion is making jokes about the Great Clown Pagliacci, but now is when I'm really starting to like own that as a real centerpiece of who I am as a person.
Is there a shitpost game on the way?
God, there might be. I mean, honestly, if they're real now, see, there wasn't, but I do know that the secret to my creative process is when somebody tells me to do something as a joke and I take it too seriously. So now there might be.
Samesies. So I get it. I feel like you just have to commit to the bit until it either ruins your life or propels you forward. And,
yes, correct.
Either outcome's fine.
100% correct.
Yeah, I was explaining who you are earlier. I was like, oh, they run Party 1. It's a really good pod. And they're like, cool. I was like, yeah, they also did the Olive Garden game. And they're like, oh, yeah. I was like,
That
well,
guy.
all right, that guy. Yeah.
It's I've said it before, like that is the Olive Garden LARP probably isn't, I wouldn't describe it as my greatest work, but it is my ultimate like business card in terms of the circles that I run in. I can like say, oh, I did this, and chances are good that someone will either say, oh, I want to know more about this, or they'll go, oh, that was you, and either way I'm in. Either way I'm good.
Yeah.
But like it's dropping that one thing will get me through the door, and that it is the ultimate icebreaker because it means that I don't have to like give any real facts about myself, and I can stay the guarded, scared man that I am inside.
It's the career equivalent of spending like $1,000 on the world's fanciest cat tree, and then the cat just doesn't give a shit, but it wants the box.
Yep.
It's just like, put in all this hard work, Party 1, running for years, doing all these other things, doing like much more game design than an unofficial LARP, and then you're just like, oh, well, here's the box, and they're all just like, oh, damn, yeah, this is good shit.
True story. The tweet that went viral with the Olive Garden LARP, I tweeted it on a LARP because the game had been done for like several months. I'd done it. I shared it with a friend that had made the joke about it, and my wife and I were going to get tacos because it was dollar taco night at like the place around the corner. So we were like, let's go get some tacos. And I tweeted, I like was like, hold on, I got to tweet this. Hey, Olive Garden, make me your digital LARP designer. Tweet. All right, phone in pocket. I'm going to get tacos. And then like halfway through dinner, I like pull out my phone and I'm like, what's going on? Oh no. Uh-oh. That's not good.
This is just you, as they say, right? The goal of Twitter is to never be the new main character.
Yep.
There's a new one each day. Just don't be it.
That was my day. That was the day that I was the main character.
Ooh, excuse me. This brought to you by the Burps at Canada Dry Bold, which is just ginger beer. But Americans don't understand what ginger beer is, but we know what bold is. So,
I mean, if you put bold next to a product, I'm gonna know exactly what I'm getting, and that's
basically
the thing. That's the product, but more.
But more, right? Like, it could be anything from like Starbucks bold to like Remington bold. Or just what. Remington bold is just where you don't, like, there are no safeties on the gun whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's just like it's a cannon that you can carry. Just like an old-fashioned pirate cannon. If you called it bold, I think it would do great, honestly.
No, I think that'd be perfect. I think that would be fantastic.
Shit, I should have called this Bold Designers in Conversation.
Damn.
Or Bold, Pretty, but Wonderful.
That's the sequel book, is not pretty but wonderful bold, and it's just that way we know.
There you go. It's like the spicy edition.
Yeah. After dark.
Oh god. Oh wow, that just brings me back to being like a kid sneaking Skinamax shit. After dark. What two words that never presaged anything good.
Never. It's never something that you want, that like you're excited to be like, oh, after dark, here we go.
No, but in an alternate universe, maybe there's like a Nick at Night after dark, or like a Food Network after dark. That's the channel I really want.
I feel like I would be hyped for Food Network after dark. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
like
it's Iron Chef, but actually it's just battle royale with cooking.
I'm in. Right? You got me. I'm in.
I feel like by the end of this thing, we're gonna have a game.
Yeah, that's the goal here. I feel like.
Yeah. You're mid-vacation right now, right?
Hustle vacation. 2020.
Hustle vacation. What does that mean?
So originally it meant that. So what had happened was, I started scheduling recordings for Party of One because I had nothing else to do. It was just I had a bunch of people that were reached out, and I was like, whatever. But then I realized about a month ago that I had finished out 2020. I just had it all recorded. And I was like, probably too far ahead. Like I feel like I can't continue to record with people and be like, hey, did you want this out on a given date? And when they're like, no, whatever. I'm like, cool. This is gonna be out this time next year. Like this will be out a year. I realized I couldn't do that. So I was like, well, I have a 4.5 month backlog. I'm just going to give myself a couple weeks off from like scheduling podcast recordings. And it started out with me saying like, I'm taking a couple weeks off of everything. No recordings, no projects, no game design. Like I am taking a few weeks off. I made it 2 days before I was like, I'm doing something. I'm just not going to like record Party of Ones and schedule Party of Ones and like, actually I'm gonna do things that are fun and like that are just me goofing around, as opposed to like Party of One, which is a project that I love dearly and it brings me a lot of joy, but it is like work. It is a project that I work on, as opposed to something like this where it's like I get to show up, I get to have fun with a friend and drink some beer. Like this is great.
It's just like you do this for an hour and then you get to move on with your life, and you don't have to obsess about the audio quality and like
right.
How much post do I need to do?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. What counts so far as things that aren't work that you've like gotten through?
I've been reading through Jack Kirby's Fourth World Saga again.
Fuck yes.
And it's great. I'm only a few issues in, but Jimmy Olsen has already become the head of a biker gang and is dealing with like a gang of aliens, and like it's great.
Yeah.
Like it starts out at 11 and just does not drop below 11.
It's perfect. His birthday today, right?
It is his birthday today. I started my Jack Kirby reread today because I got reminded that it was his birthday. Nice. It's phenomenal. So I've been doing that. I've been reading a lot of comics because I fell off of reading comics for like a lot of it. And then like it's been a lot of my project, my taking a vacation from project is thinking about other projects. Because that, like, literally, like, that was kind of when I had to rework what I was defining hustle vacation as, because I found myself, like, relaxing because, like, I had a stressful day. So I was like, I'm just going to relax. I'm going to budget out a Kickstarter. And I, like, pulled up a spreadsheet and started, like, entering numbers of, like, all right, if I'm going to produce this many episodes, if I'm going to have this many cast members, all right, I'm going to pay them this much an hour. And like, 2 hours later, I was just like, okay. Perfectly mapped out, itemized budget. I'm good. Here's what it would cost.
I spend a lot of time thinking about 30 Rock broadly, but there are a handful of scenes that I kind of just always come back to, and one of them is Liz trying to make her like dating and sex life work, and starting to like schedule it and like getting increasingly like more turned on by scheduling until she's just like, this is what's missing. This is what's been missing for my whole life, is I can schedule everything. and it's
Yeah.
like it just makes everything better.
It does.
I get it.
So
that's adulthood now.
that like honestly, like realizing that I can make something into a spreadsheet, it changes my whole perspective on like work, projects, anything. I'm like, oh, but if I could automate this process, oh, that's gonna drive some real efficiency.
Yeah, just throw some functions in there, get real fancy with it.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's the best.
They're, I don't. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds? I say I probably won't, but there are competitions for like who can make the best spreadsheet. This is like a thing that's both exists and is deeply prestigious within the finance world. Is like who can use Excel the best. Like you can win awards for it. I feel like I don't know. I might fuck around to get into that.
I feel like there are worse things to get into in 2020 than the competitive Excel spreadsheet world.
Yeah. I get into the competitive meme world.
That's also fair. Yeah, I mean, as someone
dark.
that's in it, that's not worth it. It's not worth the energy.
We are both extremely online people.
We are. This is true.
I mean, I think I've met you in person once.
Yes, it was Metatopia.
Metatopia. Yeah, at like the bar at that hotel.
Yep. You were sitting with John Adamus, and I came up and sat with John Adamus, and that was how we met.
Yeah, that's 4 years ago now, probably.
Honestly, probably has to be. Yeah, if I'm thinking through my Metatopia experiences coupled with when I think John was there, it probably had to be 2016.
Yeah. Wow, Jesus. And it's like, all right, but like you're basically one of a very select few people who I would have in like my mental Rolodex. That's just all like right. Perks of being an unbelievably and pretty much like deleteriously online person. Just like online to our detriment.
Yes, correct. Yes,
but
100%. Yes.
But like, what are you gonna do? You play with the hand you're dealt.
Honestly, it's what I'm good at is being more online than I should be, and I'm not going to do what I'm not going to not do what I'm good at.
Oh, I don't normally do this. I don't normally shout out people in chat, but Tracy just said your hair is good.
Oh, thank you.
So.
I finally we splurged and bought like proper clippers. My hair had been like growing out and it was too long for me. Traditionally, I would do like the full up faux hawk, but finally, like we clipped it and I finally figured out I can do like this ridiculous pompadour look. And honestly, it's been bringing me a lot of life lately. It's been really lifting me up.
I mean, this is as a general aesthetic, deeply 1980s, and I am very here for it.
That's kind of the end goal.
This is like the young therapist in like 1987.
I'm not here to talk to you like your dad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to rap with you. Like I'm here to rap with you person to person. I've got some. I want to tell you a little bit of a story about another with some cool game design ideas that really shook up the norm.
Just gonna set it. Just set the whole spiel to like Prince Bel-Air theme song. How my life got turned upside down by drugs.
I'm gonna play you some songs by a guy named David Byrne who's got some pretty cool ideas that I think are gonna open up your mind.
Looks like you're about to cut a promo as someone's ring manager before they go beat someone's ass in the ring. That's what? Also spot on, Tracy.
That feels right, honestly. Honestly, that's life goals really in and of itself. I don't want to have to step in the ring because look at me.
So, speaking of the ring, wrestling is like a thing that you were deeply into that I frankly was not aware of until probably this past year, and I don't really know how because you are clearly very deeply into it.
Yes, these are both true facts in that like it is core to my being, and also I am shocked that it took you until 2019, 2020 to figure that out.
No fucking clue. Just somehow just passed me all the way by. I don't know. I kind of just assumed like if you were deeply into something, you would have made a game by it, and now might be the point where you tell me that you've made a wrestling game.
I've made like 3, honestly.
Jesus fuck. You know what? Fuck it. This is my brand. My brand is doing interviews with friends and then being like, I don't know anything about these people.
That's fair. No, that's fair. Yeah, I've made 3 wrestling games and a wrestling scenario for another game. I'm looking. I've pulled up my itch.io page because I had to count them out.
What was the game you made it for that wasn't your own? Worldwide?
I made worked with my friend Blaine to make a Lovecraft-esque scenario that was about like territory style, like wrestling road horror. So the idea that you're a wrestler going from like town to town on this endless loop, and like slowly the world breaks down around you, because that idea of like being kind of a nomadic artist is, there's like a distinct kind of terror in that, of like I'm in 14 different places that all kind of look the same, and I'm here for an evening, and so turning that into a Lovecraft-esque scenario felt very natural.
That sounds that sounds fucking rad. Jesus. All right. Well, for once, I might actually need to make a note about an interview.
It's legitimately a project that I wish I could talk about more. I'm excited to talk about it because I don't feel like it gets enough love. Like,
yeah,
I genuinely love this little tiny supplement that we made for Lovecraft-esque. It's dope.
What's it called? I'm gonna just actually write this down.
It's
I
called
don't normally do this.
It's called Territory Blues.
Territory Blues. It's a good name. Lovecraft-esque. Was it like one of the stretch goals?
No, we just made it. So what happened was, my friend Blaine C. Martin ran a horror podcast. It was a one-on-one 2-player horror podcast and had me on as a guest. And when he asked me, he was like, "What scenario do you want to do?" Like, without missing a beat, I was like, "I want to do wrestling road horror." And so like we just like brainstormed. We did this. We recorded this podcast. We played through the game, and then we ended up like we after the recording we were like, we should like write this out as a scenario, like just flesh out the details that we've already put in and like create it as an actual thing. So we built out like a table of like randomly generated pro wrestling names, and here's some weird things that happen to you on the road. And we were like, that they were like, good. That's like I feel like that was it turned out to be a really interesting, like, because it fit that kind of Lovecraft-esque setting where there's like one individual investigator that slowly is losing everything. Having that person just be like going from place to place created kind of an interesting framework to tell that sort of reality is bending around all around me, and the only direction that I can go is up the road, because it is the only signpost that I have is that I have a booking in some other town tomorrow night.
Yeah, I feel like I know what I'm playing the next time I get people together to play something like that.
Hell yeah.
So this is deeply awesome for me.
I'm so excited. I want to hear about it.
I am the very like anti-Lovecraft but pro Mythos guy.
Same, very much, I mean, hard same, extreme same.
Yeah, it's like shocking. Like I want to not be, because I want to like have that comfortable distance from something that's still deeply problematic. But I'm just like, I'm too old to lie to myself about this.
But like, there's a lot of themes. Not to get too deep into it, at least from my own perspective on it. But like, there's a lot of themes that like tie really nicely, because I put thought into this for the exactly same reasons. Excuse me. I put thought into this for a lot of the exact same reasons, and I've kind of, in my own thinking it through, there is, for me, a lot of relevance in the idea of, like, seeing a world and knowing that there is some nebulous thing that is going to get you. Like, living as a queer person, like, that feeling of, like, there is something I cannot name it because it is simply a presence around me, but like there is an unsafe thing, and that feeling that mythos stories capture is very real, and I like that. I like navigating that in like a safe, controlled space, and then like that feeling of like there are cosmic forces that are here to hurt me, and I know this, and so I have to find the way to oppose them, despite knowing that whatever I try to do, I'm gonna fail at, is incredibly compelling to me. That it is all ascribed to a miserable racist is disappointing.
Yeah.
but it is a real powerful move.
Yeah, and I think we have it's sort of a baby with the bathwater situation in a lot of ways where like yeah, I get it. I get the impulse to throw away the type of horror that in many ways was spurred on by like a terrible fucking human down
Yeah,
to their core bad human.
yeah, right.
But like I could also just pivot to Ligotti, right? I could pivot to any number of other authors who took that core observation. Like the reason I think Lovecraft has that idea is because he's a paranoid bigot who thinks the entire world is out to get him.
Right.
But then there are people who are like, oh wait, but actually I live in a terrifying, hostile universe
Yeah,
where
there are
things are.
people there are people that live the existence that Lovecraft thought he was living and feel and like that I think there's a power in it's I feel like it is reclaiming something in the truest sense. It is saying like, yeah, you talked about this thing. It wasn't you, because what the fuck did you have to worry
You're
about?
a
But it
well-to-do white dude in Massachusetts. You're fine.
Yeah,
Um,
but it is me, because I am the exact thing that you were afraid of, and there's a million HP Lovecrafts out there thinking that I'm the problem.
mhm.
Like that is a very it is there's an irony in the fact that HP Lovecraft cracked this code that is living as a marginalized person, as the least marginalized person that has ever walked this earth.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah, Tracy says hasn't put those things together. I agree with them. That it's you put that quite succinctly, and I'm looking forward to transcribing it.
Good.
As a much less cogent observation, what you were describing is also very much the reason why I've always enjoyed playing mortals in World of Darkness games.
Sure, I can see that.
Like, I'm deeply uninterested in being a vampire or a werewolf or whatever the hell else. They just don't resonate with me. But the concept of just, like, being a person and just, like, a literalized, ever-present horror
Mhm.
around the corner. Just, like, and I never know which one. I never know what type of brutality might befall
Yeah,
me. But there's some shit out there, and I just kind of have to navigate it.
that's that's for me, like that is horror in its purest sense, is the acknowledgement of there is something that like I can't beat this. There is some the uneven odds to me is the centerpiece of great horror. It's the centerpiece of like it is the centerpiece of great horror, and it's the centerpiece of great like monster hunting fiction. Is the other
Mhm.
half of it is like the odds are against me, and there's that like hopefulness, or that hope that is on the edges of like, but I'm gonna figure out how to make those odds even. Like I'm going to even this, even though there is virtually a 0% chance that I actually do it.
Well, I mean, it's the inversion of tropes that gets you to Final Girl stuff,
Yep.
right? Or I mean, even to an extent like revenge porn,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I don't love I Spit on Your Grave, mostly because I just don't think it's a well executed film. But like it's just the exact same themes, just flipped.
Yeah.
And it's also why I don't particularly, with a couple notable exceptions, love torture porn. Um,
Yeah,
because
because you
it's
because you
not.
rarely see it as you rarely see it like you rarely get that like inversion. It's often like a person in a position of power exerts that power over somebody without it.
And that's it. And that's the
Profit.
whole thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just step three question mark, step four profit. Um, the Eli Roth school of horror.
Yeah.
Um, there are I think Hostel 2 is a deeply hilarious film. I don't think it intends to be, but I think it's funny as hell. Um, other than that, I'm probably not ever gonna
I
sign up.
I I feel exactly the same way. Like the closest exception that I have, I mean, I don't enjoy them, but I could in theory, is like there is an element of and it goes back to like that idea of like reversing the odds. There's an element that I love of the Saw sort of puzzle torture porn movie of like I can figure this out. Like you've presented me like a series of murder puzzles. I love murder puzzles because like again, there's that possibility of it is I presented you with an unwinnable situation. But if you're smart, if you put in the work,
Yep.
and like that, it brings it back around to me in terms of like it gives me that sense of I can beat this. I can beat these unwinnable odds. If you don't give me that chance of like this person can get out of this, then I'm watching something deeply unpleasant and I don't want to be here.
Now I'm wondering if anyone's ever done like a history of escape rooms going back to H.H. Holmes.
I would love that.
Just just that's actually where it starts, is just like the murder house is the origination point. Because yeah, I totally get it. That's when I stop enjoying the Saw films, is when the puzzles just aren't like there is no way you can understand what's even happening, even in retrospect, that they're not connected.
They don't. Yeah, you don't see, you as the viewer don't see the solution, which it takes away that sense. It takes away that very real horror movie sense of don't go in that door. It's just pull that lever. That's the lever you're being told. You're not thinking it through.
Give me dramatic irony, right? Like I need to have the observation as an outside observer that this is the wrong choice because I know the right one. And if I don't, it's just a jump scare with some torture in it. Yeah. And that's not fun.
I agree completely.
So I don't actually think of you as like a horror guy either. I'd come to think of it.
I like horror. I'm not a fan of like horror movies because I don't like jump scares. They're just a thing that I viscerally don't like react to, or rather I react, but not like, it is not a fun feeling to me. Like there are people that love, you jump and you're all like that. Like I'm just physically uncomfortable at that moment. It's actually segue like now a hard quick pivot onto a very vastly different piece of nerd property.
I don't give a shit. Just take it.
It is my least favorite moment in Lord of the Rings, and it is the fight with the cave troll, where there's the moment in the movie in the Fellowship of the Ring where like they do the jump scare, and it's a really good jump scare, and I hate it because like I'm in this movie, I'm invested, I'm like jazzed up in this fight, and then they do the thing, and then the next 20 minutes, the rest of the battle, I'm like, oh, I really wish that you hadn't done that. Damn. I just don't like jump scares, but I love horror because I love like I love emotions. If I can go full on into tweed jacket psychologist mode, I love like, for me, like a lot of fiction is like exploring a specific emotional place, and for like horror, I'd rather be afraid on my terms in like a safe environment where I can kind of control things, which I think is probably why I really love horror in gaming, because I can kind of say I can put up safety tools, I can do lines and veils, we have X and O cards, like we have the mechanics where I can be scared, uncomfortable, feel unsafe in the right ways, as opposed to just living in the world where I feel unsafe in all the wrong ways.
I mean, or the half measure, right? Of horror in more traditional media, where my choice, I have the ability to not engage with it, but the only way I can not engage with it is to simply disengage.
Right. It's either I'm in or I'm out. There's no control over, well, I'm not here for this. It's if a movie goes really hard into one of my lines, I can't then say, whoa, let's sidestep this and go this route instead.
Yeah. It's probably why I also like short form horror a lot more than long form horror.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, all right, well, this sucks, but I'm only 20 pages in, so I can dip.
For me, that's a bit like that. I don't often resonate with like long form horror because I am too much of an it makes me sad in in that kind of like existential way. Like I was talking about this with Aaron Catano Saez recently, where I was talking about we were talking about like villains, because we had made a villain on All My Fantasy Children. Like we were talking about villains, and I don't like there's the trend in fiction that I don't like, which is like, well, the bad guys just are, and they're powerful, and they're not going anywhere, and people will just like they just. For me, I I just I don't like that because it makes me sad.
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea that there's just a bad guy and they're just bad, like that just makes me sad. If I'm going to introduce a villain in a piece of fiction or a game or something I'm designing or anything, I want to do it with the caveat that like it might take a while, but they will fall. Like, and I don't like long form horror because at a certain point, it often feels like it loses the thread of like this threat will be overcome. And I think like
it's the common problem with all of King, right? Like
yeah,
even the best King, where it doesn't really lose that thread, you're just so deep in it that it feels like it does, right? Like there's no way you can know that it loses. You can know that the losers beat it. But there's no way you get through that book without just fully falling into despair.
Yeah,
and I'm knowing that.
And I'm just not here for that experience of like I want to have the horror, feel afraid, but then know, okay, but then this is going to be toppled or and even if it's at a cost, like if the hero is if it's a Pyrrhic victory of like I've beaten the villain and lost everything in the process, like that's better to me than the feeling of like, oh well, we got another 1,000 pages. This thing is still evil. Oh man.
Yeah.
Gotta put this down. Gotta put this down. Come back to it tomorrow. I'm leaving it. The villain is still evil.
Yeah.
Frick.
So I mean, what you're also describing is something that I struggle with in dystopian narratives, and I wonder if you do as well.
I do very much so. I just don't really love dystopian narratives, partially because I live in 2020. Like,
sure.
I don't love. The world is, and as long as I've been alive, has been broken, and I don't. And like, as much as I think there's value in them, I don't love that feeling of watching something be broken and being like, well, it's broken now and it's broken when it's over.
Yeah.
Tough shit.
If you can show me, even in small ways, that there's something... it doesn't even have to be like a victory condition, right? It's just something that is worth
something
fighting
that gives you hope, right? Like
yeah.
there has to be a hope. And I feel like a lot of dystopian fiction goes too hard against that to where like even if they ultimately in the end are like here's the hope, it feels like a hollow gesture on behalf of the creators as opposed to that feeling of like this might be a hollow gesture of hope in universe. It feels like, yeah, all right, here's your hope. That's not what I'm interested in.
It's a participation trophy for being sad.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's a good way to put it.
Like, and it's very clear when it is that. I feel like the one dystopia that I will always and forever love is Children of Men, and it's because I think that no matter how dark that film gets, the hope is genuinely baked into it.
Oh yeah, because the entire premise is we are following the hopeful situation in an unhopeful world. Like they have put the hope front and center and said like here it is. Like this is we have a broken world, but we are telling the story of the hopeful thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other dystopian thing that I truly love, and it's partially there's a reason that I there's a reason that I stole it to make my own game. I love, and I think this ties into it. I love dystopian comedy. Like Paranoia is near and dear to my heart, which is ultimately where Mission Accomplished came from as a game. Is like if you can poke fun at it and just go like, look, this sucks, but we can at least laugh at the acknowledgement that it sucks. Like that is to me, the best possible dystopian fiction experience of like, yeah, you know what? I can laugh at this. I can feel sad, but at least I am laughing and like giving that catharsis of acknowledgement that things are bad.
Yeah, I mean, Futurama is horrific. You would not need to do much work with Futurama to turn it into like a hard, dark dystopia. But it's funny as hell, and I love it because of that. And I can when Fry gets dropped in LA and thinks he's 10,000 years in the future because it's an even more of a blasted nightmare wasteland, and it's just like, no, this is just social commentary on how miserable LA is. Like, I'm
Yep.
good with this. This is great. Do you want to talk about like Mission Accomplished or any of
Yeah,
your other?
we can talk about Mission Accomplished. Yeah. Mission Accomplished, I had a weird experience. So I guess I should introduce Mission Accomplished. Haven't been saluting when I say it, which is a flaw on my part. Mission Accomplished, there's a salute in the title, is a role-playing game of super spies and office meetings. The premise is you are a team of James Bond secret agents. You have just saved the world, and now management has to evaluate your performance in a team meeting. It is a large group role-playing game where 4 to 10 people gather in a meeting room, and like one of them is mission control and walks you through all of the things that happen on the mission, and you have to try and like take credit for things and throw people under the bus. It was described to me in an illuminating experience as the worst ever office meeting that you'll ever take part in, which was a nightmarish game design experience. I was in a playtest of this game. I had written it. I had revised it. Like, it was version 3.0 of the game. And somebody was like, oh, this is like a really fun day job meeting. And I remember, because I often stand when I'm running games. So they said this, and I stopped for a minute, and I looked at like the materials that were in front of me and the stuff that I had written and the jokes that I had written, and went, oh God, I wrote a game about my job. Oh God, this is all just pulled straight out of my 9 to 5. And I like sank in a chair and put my head in my hand and was just like, everybody, I need a minute. Please give me 1 minute to like realize that what I've been doing is just channeling my frustrations into this particular game experience.
See, that's why you need to record your playtest, because right there is your promo video.
Oh yeah, you're honestly, if I had that moment, I would have put that right in the Kickstarter.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption. There you go.
So yeah, it ended up. So what happened was the true story of Mission Accomplished was that I was at a job that I miserably hated, and like I put 2 years of like frustration and pain into Mission Accomplished. Like every bad meeting, I would leave and be like, "Well, I'm writing Mission Accomplished now." Like I'd open it up, and once somebody pointed that out to me, I took off all of the brakes and was just like, "Okay, well then that's what we're making a game about. Let's do this." And my Mission Accomplished story is I did this for 2 years. Like 2 years of this game was put into this. And the day that the Kickstarter launched, I got laid off from that job. It was like the stars had aligned. I can't literally. So sorry, it was the day that it funded, because it was the day after it launched. Because what happened was we launched on a Tuesday. Okay. I took Monday and Tuesday off of work. So we launched on Monday. We launched on Tuesday. I had taken Monday off to like finish prepping the Kickstarter. Tuesday we launched. We were like 75% of the way funded. I checked my email Tuesday night to be like, what am I walking into? And there was like, we have an emergency meeting. Every employee has to be there, 9 a.m. sharp. So I'm like, fuck, all right, let's go. So I drive in. They announce like we're laying off hundreds of employees across the organization. And I remember, and just in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, God, let it be me. Like there are people here that love their jobs, and like I've been job hunting for months. I will take it. Walk back to my desk, my phone rings, and I'm like, this is the best day of my life. Jen saw me later that night and said she thought I lost 10 pounds. She was like, you look lighter, you look younger, like you look refreshed. And so I drove home, watched the Kickstarter fund, and cried in my living room because I was like, this is the ultimate sign that things will be okay. So that is my Mission Accomplished story. Okay. It's like, and it literally, it's funny reading it now. Like I read it recently because like the books are finally like here. I read it, like I sat down and like flipped through it recently, and I was like, God, I should have just, like my only thing, I was like, I should have left that job. Like, wow, yeah, no, I really was not happy at this job at all. The game is great, but Jesus fuck.
I wonder I wonder how many designers look at their work as just this, like an archive of past miseries, writ large.
Yeah.
Just a productive use put to our sorrows.
Oh,
Um,
I mean that feels like to me the indie scene in general is
yeah,
how can we take the things that have hurt us and create beautiful art out of them.
yeah. I mean, it's almost, I think, the dichotomy I've observed over time of like who goes where in the hobby. Like
Yep.
where do you find your home in the vertical, right? Does the concept of playing through somebody else's profoundly beautiful sorrow seem awesome to you, or seem like the worst thing? Um, and if you're on the fence, then you probably are like me and you're just down for whatever. But I feel like
Yeah.
there are people who are like, well, that's why I want to play games. I want to see what makes Jeff cry.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I'll
just
show you. And honestly, I'll show you. I will be there tomorrow. If you want to see what makes Jeff cry, I'll be there tomorrow.
do you
I got a binder.
what I mean? So I guess on that note, like, what do you find that's like broadly true about like your body of work, that everything has its own source of misery, or do you find you're designing from places beyond your sorrow as well?
So I find that like my stuff like veers towards like I love making things that are sad. I think like for me, my design impulses are like I love really specific narrow stories that elicit like extremely narrow like emotional responses.
Hmm.
And like it might vary vastly, but like I design towards making like one specific like a game has to do one thing. For me, like I want the game to give one moment. Like the and it can go in like very different directions where like I wrote like mission accomplished, like I want you to laugh at how bad your job is. I want that's all I want is to give people an excuse to be like, yo, this job sucks. Like I hate it. Like my boss is awful. Like I want that experience, and I want the specific experience of the player that thinks they did really well because it's a competitive game. Like there's a winner and a loser, and what happens is spoilers for my role playing game. But the person who gets second place when you roll all the dice and you measure the results gets the corner office promotion. The person who gets second place wins the game. The person that gets first place is deemed so important to the mission that they are black bagged, dragged off into international waters, and like broken down and rebuilt into a soulless killing machine because it's a spy agency. Like that's what you get if you and like I'm designing for that moment of like you did well, you played the game to the best of your ability, you win. Sorry.
Yeah.
That feeling of like, ah, fuck, it was all taken from me is like, and like, it's very funny. Like, it is, I think, I legitimately think like Mission Accomplished is a hilarious game for that exact reason. Is like, I wrote it as a comic, like as a comic skit with like, and it has, it has a punchline, which is I think the thing that I'm proudest of it is like, it has all of the escalation of like a classic sketch comedy bit straight down to when like you close with that ending bit of like the person that wins gets this horrible nightmare reward, and like that just gives you the perfect comic button of like, and here wraps it all up because because all of this experience of like managers throwing you under a bus and like your coworkers being awful, it all culminates because you made it over the finish line, and now we have pulled the rug so far out from under you. So like I think like for me, like I design games to be able to like capture a moment,
Okay.
and that sometimes floats towards sad, or it either floats towards like sad and existential or just pure nonsensical bits. Like
Sure.
those are the two like my two extremes. I don't aim for the middle ground.
Well, I mean, it's so I guess I have two thoughts immediately. One's more of a question, so I'll save that for a
Sure.
second. The first is it's a strange. I completely understand what you mean, but it's a strange framing in my head that games, this media that is so invested in choice, can be designed to elicit something as static as a moment,
Yeah.
right? Is a neat pairing, and I probably want to dive into that a little bit more.
Hmm.
But also, we've now talked about literature and film and now sketch comedy. This is kind of the ever-present question of, you know, when we look at game design, what is the appropriate analog when you think about it? Like, what media? And I'm like telling my parents how a game works.
Right.
Um, where do I draw a comparison so that they can actually understand it? So I think the perennial question for us.
I have an I have an answer, and I have an answer that I've clung very hard to over the years. That is, um, this is why I said it was shocking that you didn't learn this earlier. My answer, if you are looking for the thing that is fairly universally understood, that you can point to and say this is what role playing games are, it's pro wrestling. Professional wrestling for me
Sure.
is the key point, or the cipher to which you can take someone and say, like, someone who does not understand like what makes a game, and take it and say, this is what I like, this is the thing that you are familiar with, that shares the same language. Like, wrestling and role playing games share such a specific and often unspoken language, that I think like the it is to me, and my, your mileage may vary, but like, to me, that is the purest analog to like game design and like game theory, is how wrestling works. They are two uniquely similar things, despite being vastly different in every single way.
Okay, so like I assume this is both a I assume this is a talk you've given, maybe not in formal settings, but like certainly informally, if it's so central. But like, can you walk me through that?
Yes. I have given this talk formally and
Okay.
informally. This is one of my talks. This is
Okay.
one of my yes. So, wrestling is um it is an art form where like two people step in the ring, and they both know that there isn't, like, they have terms and conditions, right? Like, they know the ending of a story. They know where they have to get. There's also a bunch of people who don't have that information.
Mhm.
Everybody who is watching with the assumption that they are being told a story.
Mhm.
Nobody knows what that story is. No one has not the and the thing is, like, the audience doesn't know the story because they don't know who's going to win. The wrestlers don't know the story because they might know who's going to win, but they don't know how the crowd is going to react to the story that they're telling.
Sure.
So what ends up happening is every single person in the room, the referee, the crowd, the wrestlers, contributes something, and collectively, using only the knowledge that at the end of 12 minutes, Champ is gonna roll up crowbar.
Mhm.
Oh, that is the only piece of knowledge that anyone in the room has. That, and Champ is a baby face and crowbar is a heel. Those are the three pieces of information that we have. Together, everyone in the room is going to tell a story and is going to uniquely contribute something to this semi-improvised storytelling experience that, when you really think about it, like, transcends language barriers. Like, you can watch a match in a language that you don't speak and still like follow those story beats. Everybody's going to contribute something, and we're going to get to that point and tell a story that ultimately makes sense. That, if it's done well, will make sense. It might not make sense if it might not be told well, but like, that sense of, it's this very kind of implicit thing where you are watching this thing that you know is not real. You are watching it with the knowledge that eventually somebody's going to roll up the other person and win. And you are creating this narrative. And the way that, like, neither audience member, referee, nor wrestler knows the story.
Mhm.
For example, like, if the crowd decides that the heel is great and we start cheering the heel, that has changed the story. The
Sure.
story then changes immediately, and the wrestlers have to account for that and change the story they're telling in the ring if they want to continue telling a cohesive story.
Sure.
It is this language of, like, it is this uniquely shared language of spontaneous storytelling that, like, perfectly mirrors what happens when 2 or 5 or 10 people sit down around a table and say, we are going to tell a story together in a game of role-playing games. Like, it is this experience of, like, not like, we might know the rules. I might know that I
Sure.
roll a 20-sided dice, and what happen, and if the number is high, I do a cool thing. but like I don't know anything else. I don't know what you're going to bring to the table. I don't know what character, like I don't know what character decisions you're going to make. All I know is how to interpret that and take us to this shared place. So that is my argument that there's this uniquely shared language of like spontaneous shared storytelling and like magic that happens when groups of people commit to telling a story in the same space and time.
So this is going to be very much me trying to box with God, where like I clearly have not given this the same consideration as you, but what immediately pops out to me is that it sounds more like you're describing the kind of parasocial relationship you get from APs, than it does a private game.
So there's an aspect to that. No, and that's super interesting because I think like when you factor in the audience, you're exactly right. Like I think it changes like what I'm describing. I think you're exactly right. I think that there's also an element of even if you were to strip out the audience and just focus on the people in the ring, it's that same sense of like we know where we're going to end, we know what we're building to, but we don't know how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
There's a great talking about wrestling as an international language. There's a great story that I've heard wrestlers tell of like if I am in the middle of the ring and a wrestler's running at me and I bend over, I bend down like a perfect 90 degrees. Even if we don't speak the same language, if I am a Japanese wrestler who doesn't speak English and you are an American wrestler who doesn't speak Japanese, there's only about 4 things that can happen if I'm in the middle of the ring, you're bouncing off the ropes, and I bend over. There's only about 4 things. So we, despite the fact that we don't speak the same language, like when that thing happens, I know that one of these 3 things is going to happen. And that experience of like, okay, I roll like it maps out very nicely to like I roll the dice. We have this shared set of rules, and they might be different from culture to culture, from game to game, but like I did a thing, and I know that that's going to prompt the next piece of the story, and I can say, in theory, I could say like if we're playing Dread and I pull a brick,
sure.
There's nothing stopping me from saying, all right, well, you died. Like, you died and the world set on fire. But, like, I understand that, like, you pulled the brick, the tower is now slightly wobblier. Like, that sort of, like, implicit acknowledgement of, like, this is realistically what happens now is the stakes raise slightly and we get slightly closer to death. But, like, because there's this acknowledgement of, like, we have a shared rule system and how we're telling this story together piece by piece, it creates this sense of like each of us kind of holding each other's hand and saying like, okay, I am now bending over. You can either back body drop me, or you can back body drop me. You can reverse it into a power bomb. Like this is the thing this is the next piece of the puzzle. You fill in the next step. You only realistically have about 3 options, and like each of those is going to be satisfying in its own way.
See what I mean? Again, though, what it feels. Have you done improv?
I tried out for an improv troupe in college and was not accepted, and then became friends with the improv troupe guys later. And they said that when they did not accept me, the people that they accepted instead burned the group to the ground.
Nice. Love to see it.
It's a good sense of vindication, and also because I was their friend, I was able to tell them. I was like, you know what? You fucking sweet, you get what you deserve because I'm great.
Yeah, you should have trusted me. Could have still been doing comedy. Could have been the new Whitest Kids You Know.
Yeah, exactly.
But like when you're going through like learning different forms, if you will, right? There is a way that a herald plays out, right? Within that, like, there are 1,000 ways, millions of ways it could, in, like, a textual level, but, like, in a systemic level, a herald's going to go a certain way. Or you're going to violate the form.
You know the next thing that's going to happen.
Exactly. And this is always one of the things that I personally have struggled with, which is the concept of role-playing as improv. Because I certainly see the analog that people are trying to make. But I don't... And maybe it's that I play with so many kids because of my job.
Fair.
Kids don't yes and.
That's fair. No,
Kids just
that's
know.
entirely true.
And you have to operate with them on a very different level, and it just doesn't look anything like improv. And I think it might have just skewed my view, but again, I feel like a systemic narrative with an understood endpoint, with an audience whose participation will change the shape of the narrative, but is not fundamentally in control of it, with performers who operate like improv players in a relatively controlled manner with a shared language, sounds like an AP.
Okay. First off, how dare you? How dare you? No, honestly, you're exactly right. Like, and I think that it speaks to, I think like you breaking that down. Like, I feel called out right now.
Sorry, it didn't. That's not what my intention was.
No,
in the
best possible. I mean that in the best possible way. In terms of like, you're absolutely right in breaking down that like that's where my thought process goes, and it connects very nicely to the thought that I've been having a lot lately, and just I've honestly had for years, which is like, if I break down like the way that I interact with games, it's that I'm interacting with games as an actual play podcast producer. Like, and you laying out this like the way that I think about games in through the lens of wrestling, which is something that I fundamentally do. You're absolutely right. Like, it processes AP actual play, like that process is intrinsic to the act of play for me, which is something that I honestly have not stopped to consider despite dozens of times in which I've given this exact spiel.
I mean, it also probably explains why you are such a natural when it comes to working in AP, right? Yeah. And that's the thing we haven't really talked about it in like brief mention, but like, that is, at least as far as I'm aware, like the lion's share. If I were to say the total number of hours you have put into things in games, it's just like far and away that.
Oh, for sure. 100%. I always say that I am a podcaster who makes games. I am not a game designer who makes podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, despite the runaway success of the Olive Garden game, it's not like you have like a billion of those, but you have probably like, I don't know, tens of thousands of hours of podcast audio somewhere at this point. I mean, how many episodes are you up to with Party of One?
Party of One is, I can tell you how many I have recorded. Okay. I have 247 released. 246 released. I have 257 recorded. I have about 265 on the calendar. I then have All My Fantasy Children, which isn't quite an actual play, but is interpreting role-playing games through a podcasting narrative. So it's close. 150 episodes of that. So plus guest spots, I'm probably comfortably in 400 to 500 episodes of actual play.
I mean, you're already over 400, so it's just a question of if you hit 5. Holy shit.
It is what I do. Like, it is my medium of choice, is to do actual play. Which is why when you laid all of this out, I was like, oh my god, you're absolutely right. Like, it is intrinsic to how I think about games, is that I think about it as a performance piece. Like, it is how I come to games, is that it's a performance.
Is that how you come to games as a designer as well?
Honestly, I would probably say yes. Like, realistically, and I think it goes back to your question about like designing for a moment, right? Like, I am creating an experience for an audience. Like now, it is clicking for me in the moment, but you're right. Like, I am making an experience for an audience. If that audience is the two people playing the game, like, I'm creating that experience, and I am saying to you, like, this is what I want you to have. I want you to have this. I am not especially interested in, as a creator or a player, and this is one of those like everything is starting to make sense moments. I'm not interested as a creator or a player in, this can be anything. Like, this can be everything. This game is your everything. Because I don't think that's not how I process games, right? Like, I'm not I'm not seeing it that way. So I gravitate way closer to going back to the dichotomy of like playing someone's specific trauma of like I gravitate towards somebody saying like I want you to feel this specific thing that I felt once. Like I want you to take this moment that was important to me because like I want to perform that. Like I want that performance of I want to perform that emotional I want to exist in that space. It is me saying I'm giving you the tools to play out this specific scene and this specific emotion and this specific space and time. You're exactly right in that. And you're messing with my head here.
Sorry, I didn't.
No,
I don't know.
it's the best.
I'm super happy with how this is going. This is like I was like, well, shit. I'm gonna ask a question. And now we're just like deep into like a philosophical conversation about the nature of how we process games. So this is fucking tits.
This is great. This rule. This owns.
Yeah. So I mean, you're getting to something that I've heard a bunch of different ways, but I personally think of as like Death Ray versus Atom Bomb, which is a game can kind of be one or the other. Death Ray is an unbelievably narrow experience, but it'll penetrate anything. Yeah. It's just... And in many ways, it's kind of like what we would term indie or story game or...
Yep.
Probably going back to, like, Forge-era stuff and probably including a lot of, like, the modern itch.io shit. Lyric games and stuff. Like, that rough vertical of just, like, here's an experience.
Yeah, and here's a really specific thing.
Exactly. And if you're not down for this thing, that's fine. Here's another thing, but you're just not going to really want to do this thing
but this isn't going to be if you don't want this, then this game will not offer you. Well, this game will not be for you.
Yeah. And then there's the Atom Bomb, which is all right. Well, we're gonna like encompass everything.
Yeah.
I think obviously that's probably a false dichotomy. There's a whole range of terrible, miserable weapons that man has invented in between those two.
Sure. Yeah, there's really like honestly, once you start mapping, sources of human despair and misery to games, really, the options are limitless.
Yeah, it's the classic like can you fit infinite guests into an infinite hotel? Which one of those infinites is actually bigger than the other?
What's the flamethrower of game design? What is the spike pit over a bed of leaves of game design?
But yeah, I mean, I think so much of, I want to say discourse, but it's really not so much of the shit fight that is kind of being in this hobby. And that just kind of
100%.
relentless just never goes away. There are periods where we seem to understand each other more, and then there are periods where we seem to just not have any interest in it at all. But it's Death Ray versus Atom Bomb. It's what is the thing? How do you want to kill somebody?
It's what are you building? Are you building something? Are you building something for one person, or are you building something for 1,000 people all at once?
Yeah.
And my personal preference is I'm going to go for the Death Ray every single time. Because I grew up on old superhero comics, and so Death Rays are extremely cool. You put a skull on the side, you sit it on the moon, and then suddenly you got a moon laser. Mm-hmm. Like, who doesn't want a moon laser? But like, honestly, like I'd rather have that specific experience because it kind of actually goes back to what we were talking about with like horror of like I'd rather know that I'd rather know what I'm getting, but also have the control over it of like rather than well, this can be anything. You kind of gotta figure out if it's going to be good or not. You know what I mean? Sure. Like that to me is the Atom Bomb. And I've played a lot of Atom Bomb style games that I've loved, but like that experience of like, well, you got to find out what's good and what's not. It's like I'm more interested in kind of having it broken down and being like, this is what's going on here. Mm-hmm. Like, with make no mistake, like this is what it's building towards, and going, okay, cool, I'm here for that. Let's work to that.
I mean, I don't know. I don't actually think I have anything more to say. I like this is a pretty nice and quick summation of like a lot of what I've come to believe about games over the years. Is like
I think so. I feel very much the same way of like there's the stuff that's for everybody, and then there's the stuff that is not for everybody, but it might be for you. And like that to me is the thing that like I want that because I feel like there is it's there's I it's honestly it's I think I've thought about like how to even like explain it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but to me there's something just really special about like that feeling of like almost that it feels cheap or it feels disingenuous to say exclusivity, but like that kind of honesty is also not the right word, but that feeling of like this isn't going to be for everybody, but
Sure.
but like if it connects with you, then that's what matters. Like that feeling of like this is not. I guess it's auteurism. I guess is
It
probably the
is.
best way to
I
put
mean,
it. Of like
exclusivity isn't wrong. It's just it has baggage.
yeah, that's I think what I'm pushing against is like I don't love the baggage of it, but it also is right in terms of like I'm not making this to make some big thing that everyone's gonna love. I'm making this because I want one person to find it and say this is the most important thing in the world.
I think of it as like the difference, and this is gonna be fucking bougie as shit, so please forgive me, but of like an art society and a private club, right?
Okay.
They're both exclusive. They both have a series of requirements before you can get in. But for one, the requirements are pretty banal at the end of the day, right? Like, are you rich enough? Did you go
Yeah.
to the right school? And another is essentially interest based, right? There are certain notes. I can't just be into music and get a seat at the Norwood Club. I have to
Right.
be a famous musician to get a seat there. But ultimately, if I'm someone who can get a seat there, when I go in, I know I'm going to be among people who are down for the same thing I'm down for.
Oh yeah.
Maybe not in the exact same way. Like Keith Richards and a famous jazz pianist, but might not
It
necessarily
might not.
like
Yeah.
they might not jive in the same way. But like they're both going to be like, oh yeah, you do good work, cool. Um, it's almost the like what people lament about the con experience for smaller
Hmm.
cons, right? But it's
Hmm.
also what I deeply love about the con
Yeah.
experience.
Oh God. Yeah. I was actually I want to talk extensively about that, and then I have before I dig into that, the other analogy that I have is this connects really well into what I love about going like bringing up wrestling again because it comes up a
Fuck it, why
lot.
not?
Um, I love tiny, nothing, no one there indie shows. They are my
Mm-hmm.
favorite wrestling to go to. Usually because they're gonna get weird. And like there's something really magical about like being at a show with 20 people where you're gonna watch a guy go through a dog house made of light tubes. And you're gonna look at the 10 other people that are in the back room of this warehouse in Williamsburg, New Jersey, and you're gonna go, we all just saw a dude go through a doghouse made of light tubes. And you're gonna walk away, and the only people that are gonna have that experience are gonna be the 10 people in that room. You don't know if it got recorded. You don't know if anyone is ever gonna see anybody go through a doghouse made of light tubes again. But you walk away going like, I saw that and I shared it and I looked around and there were like 10 people just losing, and like that moment of like that sort of commonality moment of like we are the people for whom this existed.
Mm-hmm.
Like we are the people for whom this moment was for
Mm-hmm.
is really beautiful and special. And that kind of connects back to what I love about small cons is like it's not they are always the best small cons are niche. They're niche and they're
Mm-hmm.
small, and the people there are going. Like Metatopia, it's my favorite. It is my favorite event of the year
Mm-hmm.
because it is 400 people, or possibly more, possibly less. It is like a small group of people. Everyone there, that's players, designers, podcasters. Everyone there is there to just to knock some shit out for 3 days. We're you walk around and everybody is on for as much as they can be on after 3 nights of being up until 2 a.m. in the con suite. They're on in through those 3 days, and like that is my favorite experience.
Yeah, I mean it's everybody. Have you ever read 72-Hour Party People?
I have not. I'm
It's
gonna make
a
a note of it though.
very good piece. It's a nonfiction kind of long form reporting about a group of kind of well-to-do but not rich, upwardly mobile middle class individuals who get a whole bunch of really, really high quality meth and do it,
Okay.
and what they do for the next 72 hours while they're just like high out of their fucking minds. And I don't know, it's a weird comparison, but hear me out. That's always the energy that I feel like Metatopia has, or like
Yeah.
um, Unpub for the board game
Hmm.
world, or like the other verticals have their versions,
Yeah.
where it's just like, this is the only time I'm going to be able to do this insane thing. That the rest of the world
Yep.
is probably going to look at me and be like, "You're fucking crazy."
Oh yeah, I've explained Metatopia to coworkers, and they're always like, "All right, that's you're gonna spend a weekend doing that. Okay,
Yeah,
I can't stop you."
yeah. You're going to play unfinished games for so many hours straight that delirium sets in, and then you're going to discuss them in a professional context, and that's a vacation.
That's that is the vacation I look forward to from December until November. Is like I'm like, cool, next year's gonna be great. Next year, I'm gonna bring a thing that I worked really hard on
Mm-hmm.
and let strangers sometimes insult it.
Yeah, right. That's part of it. I felt really bad my first Metatopia because I made someone cry. I don't feel bad about that anymore because I know that's part of the Metatopia experience.
They warn you about that on the call that they give you. They which is I think like which is great. Like it's a great convention incentive that they
Mm-hmm.
have a pep talk call to like let you know that you're gonna cry by the end of the weekend.
Yeah,
But like it is also striking me as weird that it's a convention that has a pep talk call that tells you you're gonna cry.
yeah. That's the nature of the beast. Damn it! You had said something before that had raised something in me, but it's gone now. Um, This is the best part of doing this live is the dead air. Um,
Yep,
I don't edit shit.
that's fair.
There's going to be a raw file, and I'm going to put it up on YouTube. Um, I don't know what the fuck else is. Changing gears hard. You're like in the Philly metro area.
Yes, I'm in West Philly specifically.
Okay. Um, wow. Speak of Fresh Prince, bringing that back
Yes,
from the earlier in the conversation.
my go-to line when I tell people where I live is I live in West Philly, and I guarantee you I have heard what you were about to say 1,000 times.
Fair. No, of course. I imagine that doesn't really stop most people though. It's
No,
just
never. I honestly, it hasn't stopped anyone, but it also will not stop me from saying it
yeah,
because it's important to set the tone to establish the boundary of like, look, I know you're gonna, but I need you to know like that you're not doing
yeah.
a thing that is new.
You're not actually that clever referencing one of the most successful shows of all time.
Yeah.
What's Philly been like since all this happened?
Um. So I was about 10 blocks from like the really bad protest or the West Philly protest on 52nd Street was about 10 blocks from my apartment. So I heard it and I smelled it like go down. Like there were about 3 days where I basically didn't sleep because I could hear fire. I could hear like what were unmistakably fire, like bullets and like riot noises, coupled with the fireworks, coupled with everything, just police sirens like outside my window. But at the same time, it's also been kind of quiet. Like it is also we have a as much as we have a reputation for being like disagreeable, and there have been like very serious protests and riots and things. We also have a reputation of being kind of a liberal bastion city. So like it's been weird. It's been like there have been days on end where I hear sirens just going off and knowing exactly everything that is going on in that space. And then there are days where life goes on as normal and I go and I pick up vegan cheesesteaks from Lee's Deli, which is delicious. And I recommend anyone reading this book or watching the stream that is in West Philly go to Lee's Deli because it's great. Um, so it's been weird. I think the answer is weird. The answer to the question is weird.
Weird.
It's been weird.
No, no. It's. I mean, on the one hand, I completely understand, like, Manhattan is a deeply liberal bastion in a lot of ways, but also the NYPD is probably the largest private army in the world, and they're
Yeah, right.
very right
So
wing.
and
So
and
it's
like there have been some like truly egregious like offense human rights offenses, like when they trapped protesters on 676 and tear gassed them.
mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like there's also period like there's also just like large chunks of the city that are just like, it's one of the weird things about like doing activism in the city is like, we have we have like a very like one of our senators is like super liberal and like leading a lot of charges on things. So like in terms of like calling people and putting pressure on him, like I get responses to every text message I sent via email that are basically amount to like, yep, nope, we're on it. We got it. Like we got it. You and I are on the same page and we're good. And then the other one is Pat fucking Toomey, who is a coward and will be forgotten by history. And so I call and I leave angry voicemails and I get messages of, well, I don't care. So like it's a very weird experience and like it's weird. Weird is the way that I would describe it.
It's fair. I ask both because you're one of two people I know who live in the rough Philadelphia area, and I just haven't heard much. And two, because, you know, and this is something I'm still kind of getting the shape of. For Death Ray designers, what's it going to look like when we have essentially an entire generation of games influenced by this very singular thing? Like, because this is the lingua franca for us.
Yeah.
This is the one shared experience that we're going to have.
I've thought a lot about this, honestly, and like there is a sadness that comes with it when I stop and think about it. In that, like, there is like a really specific moment where there's a really specific moment on Party of One. You can go listen to a change, like you can listen to the show change, and it is episode. I'm actually going to find the exact episode numbers because, like, I can tell you the exact episode that dropped. Episode 47 of Party of One, which was the bite with Rich Howard. It's a great episode. Recorded this game. It was great, wonderful game. Ended up releasing it on November 7th, 2016. Which was Election Day 2016. Dropped it first thing in the morning, went off and voted, felt great. It's like a really tragic and like just painful and sad episode. And I was like, cool, I feel really good about this. You can then go to episode 48 and hear me like exasperated, having not slept in days, give a spiel about like, please be kind to yourselves. Please do what you have to do to take care of yourselves. Like, here is a game about civil resistance that like I have recorded and moved out of production order to like release earlier. And like I've seen Party of One change in that way. And I've seen people's games change in that way. And I've seen the way people approach game design change. And like, I've seen it over the last 4 years, and I've seen it over the last 4 months, like watching those specific moments like shift and watching those specific like hardline dates where like people's work changes, and it changes like in an immutable way. And I say this, and it's going to sound like I am bemoaning, but I don't think that I am, of like, I don't think it goes back.
No, I don't either.
But I also don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I think if anything, like, I'm also not gonna go the tweed jacket wearing liberal route of man, music and art got real good, man. That's made it all work. No, like, but I do think it's valuable because I think like you're exactly right. Like, there's a generation of people who were making art who were fundamentally changed in a moment, and that art took on like a new purpose and a new dimension. And I know that was true for me. Like, as a podcast producer and game designer, like, art took on a different meaning, and it became a way to do different things. And like, I think there is something beautiful in that, and I think there's something sad in that, and I think there's something like there is something lost in that. But like seeing the way that like people's work has changed to account for the simple act of living where we all live now, like
Hmm.
it's big, and it's that kind of big. It is that kind of big where like it's weird to be able to see it. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
weird to be able to see works that were made before and works that were made after and tell that they were by the same people and see the very clear moment that like the reasoning for the work changed. And like one of the reasons I remember those Party of One episodes so clearly, beyond the fact that it just was literally on election day, is like I remember talking to other podcasters, other people who were in the same position of like I released a thing 3 days before election day or whatever, and hearing and like every single podcaster I talked to who was like doing regularly recurring work, something that released before election day 2016 and something that released after, they all had the moment of like, oh yeah, you can go back to that episode and you hear me. Like you hear me doing the intro, you hear me change the show. You hear me go like, okay, this is what we're doing now. And like that sort of like hard line, like that crystallized moment of like change of intent is fascinating to me and is something that like it sticks in my brain. And I think like you're exactly like your question is right of like it's wild to see that like everyone kind of went like there's these moments where like everyone kind of goes like, yep, this is changing what I'm doing here. Like I like on the one hand, what I do fundamentally, as you correctly pointed out, the lion's share of what I do, the thing that I put in more work towards than anything, is playing imaginary games in a microphone.
Hmm.
Like that is the fundamental, like the simplest possible version of what I do. Like that my contribution to art is that I play imagination games in a microphone. And yet like the 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 tone of that and the emotion of that and the intent of that and like what that represents changed in that moment. And
Hmm.
like it's never gonna go back. Like there was a time before that where I honestly, if you'd asked, I'd be like, yeah, it's my way of playing games in front of a microphone. And it's not that anymore. And I think that's true of a lot of people who were making things where they had goals and they had things that they were doing and they had things that they wanted that after that moment and after the moment that we're currently in, I will never be able to go back and say that like I'm making fun games in front of a microphone to play with friends. Like I no longer believe that that is something that I can aspire to. And I
So,
think like that's sad, but it is also it feels like an important growth and an acknowledgement that like I should aspire to more. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, I do. And frankly, I, at least on a personal level, deeply agree. Um, what I will say is that something I've observed specifically in this past year, let's say as a microcosm of the general malaise and despair of the past four, um, is that it was almost like if I think about like what this time last year was, people were really focused on kind of fun trad games again.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's almost like we hit this nadir in 2016, and things really did change.
Mm-hmm.
But there were all these people who came in and didn't have the framework maybe to observe that change, just weren't around, or frankly didn't have any interest and just wanted to play fantasy bullshit escapism with their
Yeah.
friends. And it was almost like a counter current of pushing back against that, and then this year happened.
Right.
And it's almost like what it feels like to me is when I'm looking back, I imagine this year, not 2016, is really going to be the inflection point.
I think so. I think you're. I think you're. I think like with all of the changes that like I think you're exactly right. I think like it's just on a larger sense. I think it's impossible to ignore the changes that have happened this year.
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about 1927, 1928, and 1929. Because people only usually think about 1929, like Black Friday, the massive crash.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the arc of the thing, right? 27, there's a huge crash. 28 is one of the strongest years in market history. 29, there's the fatal crash. And that's what it feels like a lot in terms of the sensibility of why people are engaging with games. Is 2016, whoop,
Mm-hmm.
we're not having fun make-believe time anymore. Like, that's just not why we're here. Then 2017 to 2019, well, we're going right back into fun make-believe time conquering the world. Like, we're talking about, the evolution of APs as a not only viable but commercially lucrative art form. Almost distinct from the production of RPGs, right? Like, Critical Role doesn't play on the same playing field as us or as WotC. They are a different beast.
They are Critical Role. Like
exactly.
That is there is a reason that Wizards produced a Critical Role book, and it's because Wizards had to make nice with Critical Role. Like it was not Critical Role had to play nice with Wizards.
No. And then this year happened, and it's like there is no good way to say this, so I'm just going to say it, and it's going to sound fucked up. If it wasn't for lockdown and coronavirus and all the horrendous shit that's happened this year, I could have seen a world in which just Trad won. It just brought in all the new people, and everybody else got minimized out of the hobby.
I like, and what's wild to me is like what really like fucks me up is like the level to which I think you're right. Like there's this level of like is something one of the things you said, like talking about like the evolution of AP, like something that I saw personally was like we saw this big swing, and then like what's really wild is that to your point about it being an inflection point. I've been pointing this out lately that like I'm getting to like a really big point because I'm just putting parentheticals after parentheticals on it. Like that's when you know that I'm getting fired up. But is you saw the only way, again, it's gonna sound fucked up, but like you saw people in these spaces get like frankly like radicalized. Like the level to which I saw podcasters, people who were already being like, we're gonna commit to doing this, and this, like the world has changed and we have to change with it. The level and speed to which I saw the people in these circles go, all right, fuck it. Patreon is paused. We're running fundraisers for this. We're raising money for bail funds. Like the level to which they like that, like people who are making these kind of frivolous entertainment things like hit the streets and we're like, we're taking 3 weeks off because we're going to a protest because we're able-bodied like white folks and that's our job now. Like really kind of like it was wild to like it was a thing. I don't even have like the way to like ascribe a value to it. It just was a wild thing to see like that. You're right in that it felt like that was the inflection point of like, this is like we now have to change. You know, we felt like there was a change in 2016, and then 2020 said like, no, you need to really like thinking about like your place isn't enough. Now it's time to start doing like active on the ground stuff because that's the stuff that matters. Like the number of podcasts that like immediately were just like, well, we're raising money for bail funds now. Like I don't need your money to put it here instead. Like it felt like that was a drastic change that like just like was not expected.
I mean, it wasn't like I and I don't need to tell anybody this, right? Like obviously it wasn't expected. How the hell could anyone have expected?
How could anyone have planned for anything in 2020?
Exactly. But yeah, I'm just 2019 feels like a billion years ago.
It feels so long ago. I honestly, when you had said, think about where we were last year, I couldn't.
Yeah.
I was like, what the hell was I doing last year?
This time last year, people were mad because Pathfinder 2 wasn't great, and it was right after Gen Con, I think.
That what was happening this time? Oh my god.
Right? Like just completely inconsequential, just garbage. Just nobody cares. But that's the thing is we'd achieved normalcy again. I think you're
Yeah.
right. Like 2016 lit the fire under their ass, and then people just were like, oh well, my ass is charred, but like at least it's toasty.
But I haven't, yeah, but like my ass is charred, but I haven't, like, me taking this stance hasn't made a change.
Mhm.
And so like it felt like, and I say this partially, and I think it's partially because like I saw the change in myself of like 2016 happens and suddenly like it's important that I'm making art that says this and this, and then 2020 happened and I'm like, no, that's not enough. That's not enough by a long shot. And frankly, it's kind of disappointing that I thought it was enough. Like I had like, yeah, why would I think that that's where it should stop? Like, and I, like a lot of other well-meaning white folks were like, oh yeah, it's enough if I make art that has a purpose. And then it's like, no, you need to be like raising money and like doing things and like on the ground making changes. And like, it felt like a it just was a very, there's another tangible change that comes about when lockdown happens and we're all forced to sort of confront like there's no help coming from anyone but us, so we kind of have to tangibly work together here and like tangibly support one another.
I wonder how many games are going to be about that in the next
I feel like
years.
I've already seen so many.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing at all.
Not.
I just feel like,
no, I don't mean that in a pejorative sense,
no,
right?
I didn't think you did, but like I feel like I've already seen like a mountain of work just come out on that exact theme, and I can't imagine it stops. Like it's a very much like I don't see us going back.
Yeah. Accelerationist.
Yeah, and I think going very high-minded and making some very large cultural connections that I don't think are entirely accurate, but I can see a connection there, so I'm gonna make it anyway. It almost feels like like I feel like I've seen what I will refer to as the "for the love of God, play another game" discourse, like really exist in 2020 in a way that in the 5 years that I've been doing podcasts and games and like been in the scene, I have not seen that level of like aggressive vocal pushback about "for the love of God, play something that's not Dungeons and Dragons." And like I know there's a lot of like big picture reasons why, like there were a lot of high profile problems that Wizards had that should be called out. And honestly, for the record, in case anyone was looking for my stance, for the love of God, play a game that's not Dungeons and Dragons.
I mean, same.
But
those problems aren't new, is the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like those problems have occurred countless times previously. What's different is the macro situation that we care about those problems is what's different.
That we are taking a stance of like, well, we have to fix these things because the people above us have no interest in fixing them. Mm-hmm. Like on a high level, there is a change in like how people accept things, and I think that ties into that sort of movement of like, no, Wizards isn't randomly gonna get better and randomly treat their freelancers and the marginalized people in their employ better. Wizards isn't gonna randomly acknowledge their history of weird racist garbage. Like, if we're not doing that and we're not holding ourselves accountable for tying our boats to Wizards of the Coast presents Dungeons and Dragons trademark, no one is ever going to. So we have to start tangibly taking steps to kind of own that. And I think that on a high level, there's a connection there of we have to, of like, it makes sense to me that movement of forcing that consideration of like, what does it mean to present Dungeons and Dragons specifically would happen in the current cultural moment.
I mean, no gods, no dungeon masters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, holy, wow, we've been talking for an hour and a half.
I know, it's great.
I
This rules.
had no fucking idea that we had been talking for that long. I just lost track of time. Wow, I thought we were like tops an hour. That was good conversation.
It's great.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
This rules.
I'm glad you took time out of your busy vacation.
Yeah, I'm feeling great.
All right, tight. I don't know what else. What else you got?
What else do I have? We could talk more about podcasting because I love podcasting and I feel like it's a thing that I love.
Totally. Fuck it. Shoot the shit. What do you got?
I love podcasting. I realized recently that like that is what I want to be. Like I recently sat down and like thought through maybe not like a 5-year plan, but like a long-term plan. And I realized like as much as I'm like making games, and we kind of touched on this earlier, like it's not where I think my long-term passion lies.
Sure.
It's not like and you know, you very astutely no scoped me in the first half hour of this interview when you were like, yeah, obviously, like you are a podcaster, but like I was just kind of like, it hit me of like I'm not, I don't see myself among the people who see themselves as a game designer career. Like there's the type of person, and nothing but respect to them, of like who are like, I've got these 4 games that are going to map out like my next 5 years. Like I'm going to work on this. That's going to Kickstarter here. Then that's going to like carry me through to the Kickstarter for this. And like there's the type of person that will create that sort of Kickstarter cycle and that kind of publication cycle. It hit me that I'm not that person. And like it's really kind of the last like year or so has been me kind of really kind of accepting and celebrating in my own head that like I don't have that impulse. My impulse is if I have a game, I make that game and then it's done. It's out of my head. I just need to literally put it on paper so that I don't think about it anymore. Like I don't have that kind of like desire to continuously creating games as a revenue stream is not where I live.
I'm going to push back just briefly.
Okay, please.
Because I think there are 2 types of designers, and you're conflating them. I think there are more than 2, but I think you are conflating 2 types, right?
I'm certain. Yeah, please.
Because I think on the one hand, what you were considering the designer mentality is what I would consider the industrial designer, right? Like
that's actually, you're entirely correct. I already know that you're correct.
But what you were describing about yourself is I think the traditional hobbyist designer, right? The designer who's designing either for themselves first and foremost, which is where I think you get the kind of OG hackers or maybe people who do modules or things like that, right? Or people who, you know, have perhaps a particular thing they want to put out into the world, but like they don't feel any pressure to like generate things to put out into the world. It's just they have something that they want to put out. I think both of those are, I don't think this is a contentious statement. I think both of those are equally valid.
I agree
Forms
completely.
of way to be a designer. I do think you're kind of implicitly hitting on something that a lot of people feel, though, which is that if you're not turning the thing into like a revenue driver for life, somehow you're a failed designer.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And what I think is interesting, and I think what that kind of like highlights to me is in my head, and you kind of hit on this earlier, I think there are 2 very different impulses to me of like, I am thoroughly a hobbyist to designer. Like I will make a thing because I have something that I want to say in a game, but I'm realizing I am 100% an industrial podcaster. I am realizing like I want to be making things, and I want to be making things on a schedule. And like, I am like, part of me taking this vacation, what it really turned into and what was so exciting to me, like about like mapping out Kickstarters, was I was like, okay, cool. So if I did this, then I could raise this much money, and then that much money could seed this, and like building out like a real repeatable business plan, which felt like industrial in a way that like game design has never felt to me. Like it is, like you said, it's very much in the hobbyist space of like, I have a thing, I have a story. I have a game that I want to tell. I want you to have this. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna put it out, and I'm not gonna come back to it. I'm not gonna like industrialize this thing.
Mhm.
But like in terms of podcasting, like it hit me of like I'm really like getting excited about the idea of like how to make things repeatable and make things scalable and like create things that have like a like thinking about things in terms of market value and like being able like an audience value. Like it's what's really fascinating to me is feeling both of those impulses, and it's taking a certain degree of I'm going to say it's taking a certain degree of like conscious what's the best way to describe it, conscious de-education or like conscious like challenging of belief to believe that it is okay to think about stuff in that way. Because I think like being in sort of a hobbyist space, it is very easy to think of like the industrialist kind of approach as like the problem,
I
right?
mean,
Like you're selling out, you're in it
it's
for the money.
deprogramming.
Yeah, deprogram. That's the word I was
Yeah.
looking for. Thank you. But yeah, I had to kind of deprogram that impulse of like thinking about things as a business and thinking about like marketing and advertising and audiences. It's all stuff that like excites me and I enjoy doing it, but like there's an element of forcing myself to say it is okay to sit down and say I want to make a thing that that like the market wants or that an audience wants, and like I like this is me making a thing for external validation as opposed to this is me making a thing because I want to make it because it's important to me and I want to say a thing.
Yeah.
And that's realizing that I have these very different impulses when I podcast and when I game design has been like strangely liberating.
No, I mean I get it. Like the hard part of introspection often is disentangling one thing from another.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like actually looking in, generally not that hard. Figuring out what the hell you're looking at, because it's just this rat's nest of just like tangled grossness. You're just like, all right, well, where's the thread? How do I? It's like your headphones are just like two looped together, and you're like, all right, just pull it out.
Where do you start? And it's made much more difficult when the two things that you're trying to disentangle are specifically related and like interconnected. Like games and games podcasts, I'm trying to slice down, like I'm trying to carve a real narrow line. I'm preparing Blowfish where like I gotta cut a really specific line.
Yeah, you're just like, well, if I cut just an inch this way, well, I'm gonna die. So
then I'm dead. So cool. I have to find the exact right line to cut here. And I feel like I'm finally like understanding like how I approach games versus how I approach podcasts, and like being able to see that is like opening up avenues for me of like what I want to be making in terms of podcasts a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and it's like the most exciting thing in the world.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it. This has been the emerging issue of my life over the past like 5 years, which is every year I seem to add like a new slice of gaming to my life, and just each of them I engage with like vastly differently. And I feel like I've been fairly conscious about adding a new one each time, but all the same, it's just I feel like I have multiple personalities where I'm just transitioning between like games education, games playing, game designing, game collecting. My impulse for all of them is just completely different. Now adding fucking this, and I'm just like, well, I have a vastly different impulse for talking to you than I do even for shit posting on Twitter, right? Like they fill different roles.
I still don't know how my deep love of shit posting on Twitter fits into things. It might just be that I don't have another outlet for the fact that I have a shit post sense of humor.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a lot of it, right? It is the core way in which we actually interact in this hobby.
Yeah.
Like maybe not like the average player of games, the average consumer of games, but you hit a certain rarefied air, and we don't understand sincerity online anymore unless it's despairing or angry. We just only understand just the dankest of comedy. It is the way in which we speak. It's great. I love it. it's almost impenetrable for an outsider. But once you know it and it has fully rotted your brain away, it's lovely.
That's that's where I'm at. Is I feel like I'm at that nice level of like there's just if there's nothing left inside but great clown Pagliacci jokes and like Reddit am I the asshole posts
Mm-hmm.
and like that's all I have left. And I'm okay with that. I feel like I've reached a real moment of peace where I know that this is all I have inside.
Yeah, I'm knocking on my skull and hearing the hollow gourd sound. This is just rattling, just two bad images just floating around in there, just making baby memes and just
Yep.
shooting out.
And that's how we live now, and that's the world. That's where we are now.
That's life. That's what gets me through the day. That and conversations like these. On that note, if there is anything else, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm gonna start rapping.
I don't think so. I think we kind of covered all of the stuff that I wanted to talk about because this was a kick-ass conversation.
105 minutes. Yeah, fucking hulking out of this shit. It was a good conversation. Thank you. I'm glad you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing okay as well.
Thanks. I mean, it's weird to end a podcast with like, I'm glad you're not dead.
Likewise, yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think like to the point of like the world that we live in, like I've found that I end most things like that, like in terms of like I have found the grimmest and the sort of the most the roughest pleasure, like the harshest thing that brings me joy is there's this moment before I start like any podcast where we check in for a minute and like my guest and I, like when we do party of one, I'll just we'll both just kind of be like I get like it's I've seen people talk about it online very astutely of like the question of how are you doing, we all know the answer is bad.
Yeah.
And so like there's that shared kind of moment of empathy of like, yeah, I'm trying. I'm at a B minus, and frankly, like that's the best you're getting. That acknowledgement, like it's a very human thing.
Yeah.
It is a moment of realness before like the mic goes on and I become Jeff Stormer party of one host. But there's a very real moment of like where every guest I sit down with, it's like, hey, how you doing?
I've eaten $35 of beef jerky in the past day and a half. How are you?
Exactly. And so I get that. I know that feel.
Okay. Well, always a pleasure, bud.
Of course, this was the best. This was the best way to spend a Friday night.
I'm glad. Yeah, that's what I like to hear, and very much likewise. So, all right. Well, thanks for tuning in. If you tuned in, thanks for reading. If you read, that's absolutely getting cut out. So you're not going to read that if you read this.
Hey, if you read this, smash that like and subscribe button.
Yeah, exactly. If you read this, get fucked. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a good night.